Good afternoon, everybody. We have two cameras here today. Well, we have one telephone and one camera. And if I did what my supposedly superior told me to do, I would be so cross-eyed that it wouldn't be funny. But anyway, today is right close to a new year. The next time we see each other, well, I won't be seeing you, excuse me, but when you see me again, it'll be in a new year. 2017. Mercy. My dad used to say that he would like to see the century change. And I would encourage him by saying, well, Daddy, you just be 90, and you had one uncle to live to be 98, so maybe you can. No, honey, he'd say, I won't live to see the century change. And he didn't. He died in 94. So he lacked 6 years getting to do that. He died in the spring. His birthday was in February. I think I've told you that before. 27th of February. He died on the 22nd of April. And he wanted to live to see the green begin to come out again. He loved the spring. And he wanted to live to see the spring start. And he did, but he wasn't really able to go out and walk or anything like that. But things were just beginning to turn. The maples were red, just ready to spring into leaf. So that was a good time for Daddy. And that's not really what I intended to start off with. This is the second time I've started talking about something that wasn't necessarily maybe good to start off with. I'm supposed to be bright and sunny, I think. I'm not sure. Megan's phone has an apple on the back of it, and there's a bite gone out of it. I think that means something like Apple products. But I just noticed that that's what I'm looking at when I look at her phone. And the camera to my right is one that David's had for a good long while, but we haven't ever used it before. I really don't think he knew where it was. But don't tell anybody I said that. What I wanted to talk to you about today was some towns in Tazewell County that you've probably never heard of. Now, none of these towns are incorporated, but people live there. And all of these towns we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start by talking about the coal towns in Tazewell County. I've talked to you about Jewel Ridge before. You know, Jewel Ridge is up on the mountain from Richlands. And I'll bet that those of you who live in the western end of the county, in the Richlands, Jewel Ridge area, won't know about the small towns in the eastern end of the county, and vice versa. Now, those of you in Tazewell, I'm not sure. And Pocahontas, you've got to get to both ends of the county. Since one of you is right in the middle of the county and the other one's really in the northern part of the county. But anyway, I'm going to ask this question. And of course I can't hear your answer, but how many coal towns are you aware of in places that were at one time coal mining towns, had a coal mine, a tipple, shipped coal, and so on? I've written down some, And as we do this, I might think of some others. Now, I didn't think all these up by myself. I went on the net and found them because I can't remember all the towns in Tazewell County. I have not been to all these places, to a great many of them, probably more than a lot of people, but I haven't been to all of them. Now, at one time, Jewel Ridge, which we've talked about before, was a coal camp. At one time, Bosavane was a coal camp. At one time, Pocahontas was a coal camp. Aminati was a coal camp. Big Vein. I wonder if you know where that is. You know, if you go from Pocahontas to Bosavane, you go through Big Vein. Now, if you live in any other place other than that area of the county, I just about guarantee that you don't know anything about Big Vein. It's 2 words, Big Vein. When you go from Pocahontas to Bosavane, you go through it, and you don't know that you're going through it. It's like the place I grew up on top of Bradshaw Mountain. If there weren't a sign on the post office on top of that mountain that said Paynesville, you would know you were going through Paynesville, West Virginia. There's no town. It just goes along the top of the mountain, and the ridges branch off from it. And they all have the same post office, and they come to Paynesville post office to get their mail. And a lot of little towns in McDowell County, just like in Buchanan and in Tazewell, people, the old saying is, if you blink your eye, you'll miss it, because there's nothing there. And that's true of Paynesville on top of Bradshaw Mountain. As far as I know, the post office up there has been in 3 different places, possibly 4, but I can remember 3 different places where it's been. The last place, they built a brand new brick post office. Boy, the people in Paynesville then thought they were living high on the hog. We always had a frame building for a post office. Let's see, then there's Red Ash. That's down in the western end of the county too. At Raven and Red Ash, there you can't tell where one stops and the other begins there. Excuse me, I don't know if any of you have ever gone to Bristol or that places, Lebanon, Abingdon, or whatever, going that way. You can turn off 460 at Raven and go across Swords Creek and come out on 460, and that's I'm sorry, not on 460, on 19. And a lot of people travel that way, especially people out of Buchanan County going to Abingdon, Lebanon, Bristol. That's a shortcut for them. They don't have to come all the way on up here to get to those places. And I've been that way many, many, many times. Raven used to have, even in my children's lifetimes, there was a theater in Raven. And there was a place where you could get homemade ice cream. Now, I remember after they put 460 in, between here and Richlands, that oftentimes we would make that little detour there at the Exxon service station. It used to be Esso. My husband loved to still call it Esso and make the grandchildren laugh. The Exxon service station there in close to Richlands, and go around through Raven and stop at that place and get banana homemade ice cream. Well, I mean, I'm the one that got the banana homemade ice cream. The other people got something else, but I love their banana homemade ice cream. that's not there anymore, of course. But maybe it'll come back again if they do if they are successful in restoring some of those buildings there that they're working on. It would be great to see that homemade ice cream sign come out again. You know, there's a place in Bramwell, and we're so close to Bramwell that we have to claim it as a part of our region. Of course, it's a neat place. And of course, the places I've already mentioned, like Ball's Vein and Big Vein and Pocahontas, are right in Bramwell's door almost. Anyway, there's a place over there now that was an old drugstore, and they still have some of the furniture in there from the old drugstore. And like the prescription window, like you used to go up to that window to get your prescription, that's still there. And some of the tables and chairs, but they make their own ice cream, and it is positively delicious. So I don't know if there's any other place in the county. I really don't know if there's any other place, and that's not actually in the county. It's in Mercer County. But they do make really good homemade ice cream, and if you go to visit Pocahontas, you almost always want to go up and visit Bramwell also. We had some people here today who wanted to see the Sanders house. They're from Bluefield, West Virginia, and they live in a house that was built about 1902, which makes it close to the time the Sanders house was built, and it has a turret like Sanders house does. And so they were looking for history of the Sanders house to liken it or to compare it to their house in Bluefield, West Virginia. Now let's see if I see any others. A Seaboard. If you don't know where Joe Ridge is, you certainly won't know where Seaboard is. It's not an old town. It was a mining town. And I believe long after Jewel Ridge was a mine, Seaboard was still working. The mine was still working there. So all of these places that we've talked about were mining towns. I wrote a little blog, and it's on our website about Christmas in coal mining towns, and it brought back some memories to me. I've told you before, I was brought up in the country on top of a mountain, but I was still I hadn't even turned 17 when I went to live in a coal camp and work in the mine office. And so from then on, I was associated with coal camps and lived in several. And they're not bad places to live. They really aren't. Some of them are better than others, of course. But let me tell you about some of the other towns in Tazewell County and see if you recognize any of them. Now, when I say Pocahontas, most of you will recognize or do recognize that name, even if you're from the far western end of the county. But somebody wrote in who had read that blog, I believe, that I wrote, and said when they lived in Pocahontas, they had no idea there even was a Jewel Ridge, much less know where it was. And once, when I was first working with the Historical Society, in June of one year, we took what we called a mystery trip. And the lady who had been for many years an officer in the Historical Society arranged every year for there to be a trip, and nobody knew where we were going until we got there. Well, this particular year, I didn't know where we were going, but I had an idea, but I didn't know where we were going. And we got on the bus. We had one of the town buses. We got on the bus, and Miss Eva announced to us that we were going to Cedar Bluff. Now, I'm sure that you all know where Cedar Bluff is. Do you know that of the 25 or so people there were on that bus, more than half of them, and they were all local people, all Bluefield, Virginia people actually, more than half of them had never been to Cedar Bluff. I've always been a traveler, I guess. I don't know. Of course, the fact that we had parents, my parents lived in McDowell County and my husband's parents lived in Buchanan County. So we did a lot of traveling after we moved to Bluefield to get back to see our parents. But Cedar Bluff is very, very familiar to me. The way we came through it before they built the new 460 road and so on. But that was a good tour. If you've never done that, that's a fun tour. There's a lot of history in Cedar Bluff. But did you know that close to Cedar Bluff, there's a post office that's named, what is its name? Let's see, Pounding Mill. That's its name. If you look in the telephone book for Holiday Inn in the Richlands area, it's listed at Pounding Mill. There's a post office. You turn right across from the service station that has the McDonald's in it. I believe it's Texaco. You turn right there at that light and just go a little ways on that road, and there's the post office, and that's the Pounding Mill post office. Now, did you know, if you live in Bluefield, Virginia, or even in Tazewell, did you know that was the Pounding Mill post office? Did you know there was even a place named Pounding Mill? What about Falls Mills in the eastern end of the county? If you live in the western end, do you know where Falls Mills is? It's got a little history with it too, and it has a really nice lake where you can fish, and they stock it, and it's a really nice lake, convenient, and it's at a waterfall. Now on the river that goes from there to Pocahontas, right at Falls Mills, right where you turn up to go to the community of Falls Mills, there's a fall in that river. It's really pretty there, and that's why Falls Mills was named Falls Mills, was because of that fall. But then, I guess it was the Corps of Engineers. I don't know who made it, but anyhow, somebody made a dam up in Falls Mills, and made the lake. And so some people think that's why it was named Falls Mills, but that's not so. It was the one in the Bluestone River that it was named for. Now, did you know that just not very far from Falls Mills, there's a place named Yards, Y-A-R-D-S? Those of you in the northern end of the county, do you know where Yards is? Or if you do, why it was named Yards? We had a group of people come from Richmond some years ago to help us get our tourism activities on the right road, I guess is what you could say. I'm not sure how many of them there were, 15, 20. Anyhow, I rode on the bus with them from the visitor center to Pocahontas, and I researched that area because I didn't know that much about it. I was very familiar with Pocahontas, but not with the little towns along the way from Bluefield, Virginia over there. And I knew where Yards was because I worked with a lady when I worked at the high school who lived at Yards. And so I knew where she lived, so I knew where that was. And I also knew that the road between Bluefield, Virginia and Pocahontas goes into West Virginia and out of West Virginia and back into West Virginia again, at least twice that way. And but I didn't know anything about Yards per se. We used to have a gentleman who came from down there to the visitor center right frequently, and he told us a lot of things about Yards that we didn't know. there's a big railroad yard at Yards. I had no idea that. I knew the train went down that way, but I had no idea there was a big railroad yard there. And at one time, I think the story's told that a lot of the cars that were actually supposed to be on the yard in Bluefield were stored at Yards. And they had room to do it. That's a big yard, big railroad yard. Oh, it's not as big as the Bluefield yard, or it's not as big as Welder yard in Buchanan County, but it's a good sized yard. And that's why that little place is named Yards. I don't know why Nemours is named Nemours, but I know that when I researched that area, now see, when you go on beyond Yards, you go to Nemours. And I have a real sweet granddaughter-in-law who called Nemours her home. That's where she grew up. She went to Pocahontas to school. But I didn't know until I did that research that there was a huge powder plant at Nemours back during World War II, and that they not only supplied the powder for the mine at Pocahontas, they supplied a great deal of the powder for the U.S. Navy in particular. And I remember when I first went to work at Roseanne in Buchanan County, I remember seeing those boxes of powder, of the dynamite, and they had DuPont Nemours, or Nemours DuPont. I can't remember that. But I had no idea at that time where either one of those, where Nemours was or what DuPont meant. But anyway, I found that was over there at Nemours. It's to the right of the road when you get to the place in Nemours where you turn up into Nemours proper, I guess. It's spread out like the place I grew up, I told you about. And but when right across from that, to the right of it, is where that powder plant was. You find out all kinds of interesting things when you start researching. Now you go on through Pocahontas, okay, and we've talked about that. It's a very interesting town, but you know where that is because you hear about it. Things have been going on. They've been trying to do some things to get Pocahontas going again like it once was, or at least better than it has been. You go on through there and you go through Big Vein, and then you come into Balsavane. And at one time there was a big tipple at Balsavane, and I think they intended for the two mines to be connected. I think that's what the original intention was, underground, I mean. And then you go, after you go through Balsavane, which was a coal camp, and still a lot of the homes that are there existed when it was a coal camp. And then you go on across a little hill, and you come to the new road that was built to help the access to the new prison in near Pocahontas, and then through a little place, a little valley, a place, and you go into what's actually called Abbs Valley. Now, Abbs Valley has a school and a post office, and it was named for some people who had, I believe, were destroyed by the Indians. So there's a lot of history over there and a historical marker and so on. Now, let me tell you some of the other. I think Megan just signaled to me that there's 5 minutes left, so I want to try to tell you some of these other places that if you don't know about them and you would like to know about them, just put them in your computer if you have one, and just put like Burke's Garden, Virginia, or Pounding Mill or whatever. But I'm just going to read the names that I didn't know anything about at all until I did research on them. Did you know there's a place called Liberty in Tazewell County? There's a place called Pisgah. There's a place called Frog Level, Paint Lick, Bandy, Tannersville, Adria, Wardell. Now that's right at the western end of Tazewell County. Horsepen. My husband worked there. Consol had an office at Horsepen. And Jim worked out of it sometimes, so I've been over there lots of times. It's not too far from McDowell County. You go over in there and you never know whether you're in McDowell County or Tazewell County. That's really the way it is. I always think this is about the funniest one when I look through these towns. Did you know there's a place in Tazewell County called Busthead? Now, why do you suppose they would name a place Busthead? Oh, I'll never know. I'm sure there's all kinds of stories about them, but I don't know them all, or I don't really know any of them. Maiden Springs. Do you know there's a place named Maiden Springs? Some history there, too. Did you know there's a place named Coldan? C-O-A-L-D-A-N? I'd never heard of that till I started doing some research. Of course, most people have heard from the name Doran. It was not a mining town like Red Ash and Raven were. Actually, Red Ash was the one that had the mine. You used to drive under the tipple when you went through on 460 down to Buchanan County, which we used to do a lot when we first moved to Tazewell County. And you drove right under the tipple at Red Ash. Doran is where there's a little airport. And I had a cousin who was killed in a plane crash when he took off from Doran Airport. I had just about forgotten that. His cousin lives here, his daughter lives here in Bluefield, Virginia. She's a retired Tazewell County teacher, and he had been somewhere to pick up a plane, a new plane. He was the pilot, and he wrecked at Doran. That's where he was killed. That's not a real good memory of Doran. I also remember when it used to flood.
Right.
Goodness gracious. All kinds of things. I wanted to tell you about a woman who was drowned in the 1901 flood in Tazewell County. Her name was Molly Harper. And there was a place named Molly Harper. Did you ever hear of that? I've read stories that were printed in the newspaper, the Clinch Valley News, about Molly Harper. And there were evidently lots of houses there, maybe a community center or something, and they had dances and so on. Have you ever heard of Molly Harper? Ask your parents or grandparents if they ever heard of Molly Harper. There's nothing there now, to my knowledge. There's absolutely nothing there. So there's probably several places in Tazewell County that bear no evidence that there used to be homes, farms, and gardens, and children playing, and schools, and so on. So, if you get a chance to research those on the computer, they have a lot of information. Now, I have a whole bunch of BBs here with me.
You only give them one away.
I have a micromanager boss, okay?
Preach.
Now, he reminded me that I was supposed to give one away. Not that I would have forgotten it with two in my hand, but I might have. You know, I'm not young anymore. You can't tell what I might forget.
Say.
Anyhow, today, instead of giving this to the person who contacts us that lives the farthest away from us. I'm going to give this to the person who lives the closest to Richlands. Richlands is in the northern end of the county. And sometimes, in the western end of the county. It's a good thing he reminded me. Richlands is in the very western end of the county. We're in the very eastern end of the county. So maybe there's a little bit of competition there, and with various things like football and things like that. But anyway, the person who lives the closest to the town of Richlands, if you'll contact us on Facebook or call, whatever you'd like to do, we'll mail you a BB. And be happy to do so. And also be happy that you've watched us. If the Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, next Thursday at 4 o'clock, we'll be back again. And we're also going to be on YouTube. So you need to be able to get to YouTube. I don't know what they may have me doing next. I can Twitter. I may do that next. There's no telling. But do sign up for YouTube, so because we are going to be on that.
Subscribe.
I'm sorry.
Subscribe to the YouTube
Subscribe. See, I can't even remember words anymore. Subscribe to YouTube so you'll be able to see us there. And don't forget, next Thursday at 4 o'clock. Until then, I love you. Every one of you.